I was sitting in a dim corner of Harbor Lights Cafe when a strange woman approached my table. Without a word, she placed a heavy gray metal box in front of me. Her eyes scanned the room before she leaned in. "Guard this with your life tonight. Open it at midnight." Not a second before. Before I could ask what she meant, she vanished into the freezing November darkness. I slipped the box into my heavy winter jacket and drove home, gripping the steering wheel tight. When I finally opened that box at exactly midnight, what I found inside shattered my world into a million irreversible pieces. Welcome to my story. Wondering what was in the box? Like and subscribe to see how this nightmare unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. Quick disclaimer. This is a fictional story based on real themes of family betrayal, but the lessons are very real. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The cafe was a weathered building perched on Kennebunk's Main Street. It had been exactly 1 year since my wife Dorothy passed away, and our farmhouse felt far too big and quiet. We owned 42 acres of prime Maine land that had been in her family for 3 generations. Every time I walked through the kitchen, I expected to see her at the stove, humming, while stirring her famous chowder. But it was just me and the silence of a life half-lived. I was watching cars crawl past on Route 1 when she appeared. She didn't walk in like a normal customer. She moved with purpose, her dark coat buttoned to the collar, a gray scarf wrapped tight, mid-40s, calculating eyes. She crossed the cafe in 6 brisk strides and set the metal box on my table. It looked fireproof, solid, heavy. "Guard this with your life tonight," she said. It was a military command. My old instincts kicked in. Assess the threat. "Who are you?" I demanded. She placed a plain white envelope beside the box. "Open it at midnight, not a second before." "Look, lady, I don't know what this is about." "Your wife knew," she interrupted. "And Dorothy knew. And now you need to know." My chest tightened. "Dorothy, what did you just say?" She was already weaving toward the back exit. I stood up to follow, but the weight of Dorothy's name rooted me to the spot. By the time I reached the back door, she was gone. I went back inside, grabbed the box, and headed for my truck. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a small brass key and a folded note with frantic handwriting. "Midnight, not a second before. Trust no one, V." My pulse pounded. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 9:47 p.m., 2 hours and 13 minutes. The drive home felt like an eternity. Route 9 stretched out dark, my headlights cutting through the fog. I kept glancing at the lockbox. For a year, I had been stuck in this suffocating limbo. Everyone offered hollow condolences, telling me time would heal my broken heart. But time hadn't done a damn thing. I pulled onto the gravel lane leading to the farm. The house loomed ahead, dark and empty. I parked and sat there for a minute, listening to the wind howl. November in Maine. The world was dying back, preparing for winter's grip. I carried the box inside, flipped on the kitchen light, and set it on the old oak table. The surface was scarred from decades of family meals. Dorothy used to sit there every morning, reading the paper. I checked the clock. 10:45 p.m. I paced the kitchen. I made coffee. My military training had taught me patience, but this was different. This was a box with my dead wife's name attached to it. At 11:30 p.m., I finally sat down. I ran my thumb over the keyhole. The note had explicitly said midnight. Why midnight? What difference did 30 minutes make? But my gut told me to wait. "Trust your gut, Russell," Dorothy used to say. 11:55 p.m. I slid the key into the lock. 5 minutes. The kitchen was dead silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Midnight. I turned the key. The lock clicked sharply. The lid lifted with a soft creak. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a cell phone, not just any phone, Dorothy's phone. I recognized the cracked screen protector immediately. The police had told me they never found her phone after the accident. They said it must have been lost in the woods. I lifted it carefully. I pressed the power button, expecting it to be dead. Instead, the phone vibrated violently in my palm. The screen lit up with a pale blue light. A single notification flashed. "Incoming call, unknown caller, 12:01 a.m. My hand trembled as my thumb hovered over the green button. I had lost Dorothy a year ago. Her phone had been missing for 12 months, and now it was ringing in my kitchen. I pressed answer. Static crackled through the line. Then, a mechanically distorted voice spoke. "Russell Hayes." "Who is this?" I gripped the edge of the table. Your life is in danger. Listen carefully. Don't trust your daughter. Don't trust her husband. Don't trust the police. What the hell are you talking about? Your wife discovered something. Check her office, withdrawal records, large cash amounts. What does Allison have to do with? The line went dead. I stood there, listening to the hollow silence. The clock read 12:03 a.m. Don't trust your daughter. Allison, my only child, 38 years old, married to Dominic Cruz, a slick financial advisor in Portland. She called me every week, playing the devoted, grieving daughter. But that voice knew something. If what they said was true, my entire life was built on lies. Sleep didn't come. I spent the night pacing the hardwood floors, downing black coffee, and staring at that cracked phone. By dawn, the storm outside had broken, but the tempest inside my head was just beginning. At 8 a.m., the crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. I moved to the front window. It was a silver Lexus Allison. She never showed up unannounced. Not in the 6 years she had been married to Dominic. I unlocked the front door. Dad, she smiled, but it was brittle. I hope it's not too early. I was heading to a client meeting and thought I'd stop by. Got coffee? Please, I muttered. She breezed past me, setting her expensive purse on the kitchen table, right where Dorothy's phone had rung just hours ago. You look exhausted, Dad, she noted with condescending pity. I'm fine. What's this really about, Allison? She sighed heavily and pulled a glossy folder from her purse. Dad, your 42 acres is way too much land for one man to manage alone. The red barn needs a new roof. It's a money pit. I'm managing, I snapped. Are you? She slid the folder across the table. The logo for Pinnacle Holdings was embossed in gold. Pinnacle Holdings made a formal offer on the property. $3.9 million. The number landed like a lead weight. You could buy a luxury condo in Portland. She rushed out, rehearsed and desperate. You'd be closer to civilization, closer to Dominic and me, Dad. You could finally move on. Move on, as if Dorothy was just a bad habit. As if 3 generations of family blood and sweat were just an obstacle to my daughter's convenience. I opened the folder, a binding offer. How long have you known about this, Allison? She avoided my eyes. Dominic heard about it months ago. He immediately thought of you. He's just looking out for your future. Dominic, her entitled, slick-haired husband. I closed the folder. I'm not interested. Her jaw tightened. Don't be stubborn, old man. This land is worth far more to them than it is to you. It's just dirt and memories. This was your mother's family land, I said dangerously. And Mom is gone. The words cracked like a whip. She caught herself. She's gone, Dad, and she would want you to be practical. She wouldn't want you out here rotting away. I studied my daughter, the tension in her shoulders, the tremor in her hands, the hungry gleam in her eyes when she said $3.9 million. Don't trust your daughter. I'll think about it. I lied. Relief flooded her face. That's all I'm asking. She smiled, checking her expensive gold watch. I really should go. You can't hold on to the past forever, Dad, sometimes. Letting go is the only right thing to do. I watched her Lexus disappear down the road. Nobody offers that kind of absurd money for an aging farm unless they desperately want what's underneath it. I turned back inside and headed straight for Dorothy's office. The room still smelled of lavender sachets. I sat at her antique roll-top desk, my hands shaking, and flipped open her laptop. Password: Russell 1956. I opened her email client and typed Pinnacle into the search bar. My blood ran cold. 3 months before she passed away, she'd received an email. We are prepared to increase our offer to $3. $9 million. I scrolled further back 6 months ago. The offer was $3.2 million. They had relentlessly pursued her, and Dorothy had never mentioned a single word of it. I pulled open her heavy metal filing cabinet and grabbed the folder labeled 2023 Financials. I flipped through bank statements. Everything looked normal until July 12th. $8. $500 cash withdrawal. August 4th, $13. $600 cash withdrawal. September 18th, $2,400 cash withdrawal. Total, $42,500. Dorothy tracked every penny. She wouldn't withdraw 42 grand in untraceable cash without a terrifying reason. I kept digging. Wedged between 2 tax folders, I found a small notebook. Her handwriting was hurried, erratic. August 15th. Saw the truck again. Late, no headlights. Why? August 22nd. Dominic asking about the property again. Too pushy, he knows something, September 3rd. Voices near the old well. 2. They ran when I turned on the porch light. September 10th. Why do they want my farm? What are they hiding? I turned to the last entry. November 10th. 5 days before I lost her. Something is terribly wrong. I need help. Who can I trust? I stared at the frantic words. My wife hadn't just died in a tragic accident. She was hunting something down. And whatever she had found, it had cost her her life. Suddenly, a loud, aggressive pounding on the front door shattered the silence. I glanced through the window. An unmarked black sedan with government plates was parked right behind my truck. I shoved the notebook into my pocket and went to answer the door. I pulled the door open, keeping my expression neutral. Standing on my porch was a man in his early 50s, wearing a Maine State Police jacket and a shiny badge aggressively clipped to his belt. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked smoothly. "I'm Detective Vincent Morales. We need to talk. Don't trust the police." The distorted voice on Dorothy's phone echoed in my skull. I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "Come in," I said. "I'll get right to the point. Mr. Hayes, I'm officially reopening the investigation into what happened to your wife." The room seemed to violently tilt, reopening. "New evidence suggests it may not have been an accidental fall," he said, steepling his fingers. I gripped the edge of the counter. "What new evidence?" "I can't discuss the details of an active investigation." His voice was maddeningly calm. "But I need to ask you directly. Had your wife mentioned feeling threatened? Was anyone concerning her?" I felt the heavy weight of Dorothy's notebook burning a hole in my pocket. "Who can I trust?" "No," I lied smoothly. "Nothing." His eyes narrowed. "So you're absolutely certain there was no unusual behavior?" "You people told me she fell," I said, letting manufactured anger seep into my voice. "You told me it was an accident in the dark." That's what the initial report concluded. Morales stood up slowly, handing me a card. "Reports miss things, Mr. Hayes. Just before your wife passed, did anyone show an unusual interest in this property? Any developers? Why do they want my farm?" "Dorothy handled the calls," I said, sipping my lukewarm coffee. "She never mentioned anything unusual. And your son-in-law?" "Dominic Cruz?" Morales pressed. "He helps out financially, doesn't he? Any unusual transactions?" My pulse kicked up a notch, but my military training kept my face frozen like stone. "We live simply, farm income and my military pension. We don't need his handouts." Morales stared at me for a long moment, before nodding. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Be careful, Mr. Hayes. There are things about what happened to your wife that we didn't tell you. And someone out there really doesn't want you knowing the truth. Call me directly if anything unusual happens." When his black sedan disappeared, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I pulled Dorothy's cracked phone from my pocket. It was still at 15% battery. That was physically impossible for a phone lost for a year, unless someone had been actively maintaining it. I opened her notes app, mostly mundane, but at the very bottom, there was a single note dated the exact day before I lost her. "The truth is buried where the roses bloom. If I don't come back, Russell, dig deep." My hands started to shake. The roses, Dorothy's memorial rose garden on the east side of the property. 24 stunning peace roses. Suddenly, the phone vibrated violently. A new text message. "They're watching. Be careful tonight." A second later, a grainy photo loaded onto the screen. It was a picture of my farmhouse, my driveway, taken from the tree line just moments ago. Someone was out there, right now. A pristine black Mercedes stopped aggressively in my driveway. The driver's door opened and Dominic Cruz stepped out. He was 40 years old, built lean from expensive gyms, wearing a charcoal-tailored suit. But his eyes were dead and cold as they swept across my property. He had never shown up unannounced in 6 years. Russell, Dominic smiled, extending a manicured hand. The smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem friendly, but it never reached his dead eyes. I didn't take his hand. "Dominic, this is entirely unexpected. I was in the area, thought I'd check on you." He casually brushed past me, setting a sleek leather briefcase on the oak table. "Allison mentioned you're thinking about the Pinnacle Holdings offer." "I said I'd think about it," I replied, crossing my arms. "Good! Because I took the liberty of running some numbers. he said smoothly, pulling out printed spreadsheets. Your property taxes are bleeding you dry, maintenance, utilities, insurance, farm revenue is down 30%. One bad harvest, and you're looking at total foreclosure. I am perfectly aware of my expenses, I growled. You're Allison's financial advisor, not mine. His smile tightened, turning brittle. As someone who cares about this family, then this property has real potential, Russell. There are people who understand what this land is truly worth. He turned to the window, silhouetted against the dying sun. People who are willing to pay, and people who are willing to go to considerable lengths to secure valuable assets. The phrasing was carefully corporate, but the menacing implication landed like a physical blow. Is that why you're really here, Dominic? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. To stand in my house and threaten me. He calmly collected his papers. The offer is generous, Russell. It would be highly unfortunate if you waited too long and found yourself with fewer options. He paused at the door. And that detective who visited today? Morales, be very careful what you tell him. Not everyone in law enforcement has your best interests at heart. He walked out, speeding off in a spray of gravel, the dark SUV trailing close behind him. I stood alone in the kitchen, raw fury and adrenaline surging through my veins. Dominic Cruz had just threatened my life. The phone vibrated in my pocket. One new message. Meet me at the barn, midnight. Come alone, I have answers, V. Answers, finally. I looked out at the suffocating darkness beyond my kitchen windows. The old red barn sat about 100 yards from the main house, isolated and surrounded by flat, open ground. If this midnight meeting was a trap, I would see them coming. And if it wasn't, if V actually had the answers about what Dorothy had discovered, then I had absolutely no choice but to go. I layered up for the freezing cold, heavy winter jacket, steel-toed boots. I clipped the Army-issue flashlight to my belt and pulled the K-bar knife from its sheath, testing the edge with my thumb. It was razor sharp. Before I walked out the door, I grabbed a feed store receipt and quickly scrawled a note to my brother-in-law. Dennis, if something happens, check the lockbox in my truck. Rye slid it under the coffee pot where he'd easily find it the next morning. At 11:30 p.m., I stepped out into the biting November cold. The sky was crystal clear, the stars scattered like broken glass. The ground was frozen solid, the frost loudly crunching under my heavy boots. At 11:45 p.m. I eased open the side door. The rusty hinges screamed in the silence inside. The darkness was thick enough to choke on. The air smelled of old hay and damp wood. I clicked on the flashlight, the harsh beam cutting through the shadows, illuminating the rusted shell of Dorothy's old Ford tractor. Hello? My voice echoed off the high rafters, absolute silence, then sudden movement, fast, to my immediate left. I spun, dropping into a defensive crouch, my hand instantly drawing the heavy combat knife. Don't, a woman's voice, calm, authoritative. I'm not here to hurt you. I swept the flashlight beam toward the voice. It was her, the woman from Harbor Lights Cafe, mid-40s, dark hair pulled tightly back, wearing tactical dark clothes. Her sharp eyes didn't flinch at the blinding light or the lethal blade in my hand. Instead, she slowly raised her left hand. She was holding a badge, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Russell Hayes, I'm Special Agent Veronica Hart. She slowly lowered the gold shield. Your wife was working with the Bureau before she passed away. And now, I desperately need your help to finish what she started. I lowered the knife slightly, but my grip remained white-knuckled. FBI. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Dorothy never told me a damn thing she couldn't. Hart said, stepping closer. 6 months before she died, your wife contacted our Boston field office. She discovered something happening on this property. Something incredibly dangerous. The massive barn suddenly felt too small. What kind of something? Unusual high-level criminal activity, Hart explained, pulling out a secure smartphone and swiping through a locked folder of photos. Late-night vehicles running without headlights, sounds in the woods, unknown men. She started documenting everything. She held out the phone. I recognized Dorothy's neat handwriting on date-stamped notes. There were blurry photos taken from our kitchen window, showing dark utility trucks, moving through our back acreage at 2:00 a.m. My hand tightened around the K-bar's handle. Why didn't she tell me? Because she was protecting you, Russell. Hart's voice softened just a fraction. Your wife was incredibly smart and meticulous. She knew your military background. She knew that if she told you, you'd grab your rifle and confront whoever was trespassing on your land. And that would have gotten you both killed. Killed by who? Risk from what? I demanded. Hart met my eyes, her expression turning hard as stone. There is a massive natural limestone cave system running deep underneath your property. The hidden entrance is near the old well, on the north ridge. Someone has been using it as a primary distribution point for controlled substances. The words took a long moment to fully compute. Drugs? Running on my farm? A multi-million-dollar operation, she confirmed. Your farm's location is strategically perfect. It's rural, isolated, but close enough to major interstate highways. They bring massive shipments in, under the cover of darkness, stockpile them in the caves, and move them out before dawn. She paused. We've been tracking an aggressive network run by Sergei Kozlov, a ruthless Russian national based out of Boston. He's incredibly dangerous, and very, very connected. And Dominic, I said, the name tasting like poison. Exactly, Hart nodded. We believe your son-in-law facilitated the entire arrangement. He has the elite financial expertise to launder their dirty money, and the real estate connections to identify perfect properties like yours. Dorothy started putting the pieces together when he relentlessly pressured her to sell to Pinnacle Holdings. The glossy spreadsheets, the aggressive offers, Dominic's arrogant visit this afternoon with his veiled threats. The pieces locked violently into place. How long? I rasped. At least 18 months, maybe longer. By early autumn, Dorothy had gathered enough hard evidence that we officially opened a formal federal investigation. She courageously agreed to work as an informant, to wear a wire, document their schedules, and get us the undeniable proof we needed to take them down. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound nausea washing over me. I pictured my sweet, careful Dorothy walking around with hidden FBI equipment, collecting evidence against armed criminals operating directly beneath our home. All while I was completely oblivious. What happened on November 15th? I forced the words past the massive lump in my throat. What really happened? Hart's expression turned grim. We lost contact with her that afternoon. She was scheduled to check in at 6:00 p.m. She didn't. We had agents en route immediately, but they were too late. Russell, what happened to your wife was not a tragic accident in the dark. The barn floor seemed to violently tilt. I grabbed the rusted fender of the tractor to keep from collapsing. Someone discovered she was working with us, Hart said quietly. And they silenced her. The people responsible for your wife's murder are still here. They are still using your land, and they are still profiting from her death. Grief instantly vaporized. In its place, a hot, blinding, white-hot rage exploded in my chest like a localized sun. My brave Dorothy had been trying to protect our family farm, trying to protect me, and Dominic and his cartel thugs had murdered her and staged it as a tragic fall. For a year, I had drowned in misery, but it was them. My voice came out different, colder, deadlier. The evidence box, I said, looking at Hart. Dorothy left a note on her phone. She said the truth is buried where the roses bloom. Hart's eyes sharpened like a predator sensing blood. Show me. We moved fast. Leaving the barn, we sprinted across the frost-hardened ground. The Memorial Rose Garden was situated on the east side of the property, sheltered by a dense stand of ancient pines. It consisted of 24 beautiful bushes Dorothy had meticulously tended for 15 years. Right now, their bare winter branches looked skeletal in the pale moonlight. I fell to my knees at the absolute center, right where a small stone marker bore her late mother's name. Dig deep, she had written. Hart produced a small military-grade folding shovel from inside her jacket. Let me know, I said, snatching it from her grip. This is my land, she was my wife, I'll dig. It was 1 a.m. The frozen fiercely resisted the metal blade, sending violent shocks up my arms with every strike. My shoulders burned in agony, and freezing sweat dripped down my face, but I kept digging. Hart stood watch, her hand resting heavily on the bulge, under her jacket her service weapon. 6 inches, a foot, 18 inches. At exactly 2 feet down, the shovel struck something solid. Metal. I dropped the tool and frantically cleared the loose dirt with my bare hands. A heavy box emerged, another fireproof safe, secured with a sturdy combination dial. Dorothy's birthday, I muttered, my fingers numb with cold as I spun the numbers. 0417, click. The heavy lid popped open. Inside were USB flash drives, thick folders of printed documents, grainy photographs, small audio recording devices, and a detailed ledger entirely in Dorothy's neat handwriting. It meticulously documented dates, times, vehicle descriptions, license plates, and cash drops. It was everything the FBI would ever need to dismantle Kozlov's entire empire. And resting at the very bottom was a thick sealed envelope with my name written in Dorothy's elegant script. Suddenly, Hart's secure phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face instantly drained of color. "We need to move right now." "What?" I asked, grabbing the box. "My backup is still 10 minutes out, but someone else is already here." That's when I heard it. The low, aggressive rumble of heavy engines, multiple vehicles approaching the farm fast, running without their headlights. Hart grabbed my arm and violently yanked me down behind the thorny rose bushes. "Stay low and keep quiet. You said you had backup." "Those aren't our vehicles," she hissed. Blinding halogen headlights suddenly swept across the property, cutting through the darkness like a knife. 3 vehicles, 2 massive dark SUVs, and a sleek sedan slammed to a halt 50 yards from the garden. The sedan's door popped open. Even in the harsh glare, I instantly recognized the expensive profile of Dominic's black Mercedes. Hart drew her Glock. "Russell, listen to me carefully. When I say run, you grab that evidence box and sprint for the tree line. Do not stop. Do not look back. I am not leaving my property," I snarled, drawing my KK bar. "You are the only witness who knows where this evidence was buried. If they take you out, everything Dorothy died for is gone." Her voice was steel. "You run, I will cover you." The heavy SUV doors opened. Massive men climbed out. They were lethally coordinated. These weren't local street thugs. They were highly trained professionals. "I know you're out there, Russell." Dominic's voice carried clearly across the freezing air, dripping with arrogant confidence. "And I know you found something you shouldn't have." He had been watching, waiting, and now we were trapped. Hart tightened her grip on her weapon. I clutched the heavy metal box against my chest. Dominic stepped fully into the headlights. Behind him, looking pale, terrified, and shaking violently, was my daughter, Allison. And standing right next to her was a man built like a concrete wall, Bruno, Kozlov's infamous enforcer. "Russell," Dominic said smoothly, walking a few steps closer. "Don't be a stubborn old fool. Put down the box and step out where we can see you." "Like hell," I roared, standing up from behind the rose bushes, the knife glinting in my hand. "This is my land. This is my wife's evidence." Dominic sneered, an ugly, condescending look. "Your wife made a fatal mistake getting involved in business that absolutely did not concern her. Hand it over, old man. You have nothing." Rage exploded in my brain, blinding me. "You murdered her for this farm. You used my land for your narcotics, and you used my daughter." I looked furiously at Allison. "Did you know what they did to your mother?" "Daddy," Allison choked on a sob, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know Mom was investigating." "I swear." "Shut up, Allison," Dominic snapped, his tone laced with venom. He nodded at the enforcer. Bruno's massive hand reached smoothly inside his jacket for a weapon. "Federal agent! Drop your weapons now!" Hart screamed, standing up and aiming her gun squarely at Dominic's chest. Before Bruno could even draw his gun, the night completely exploded. Blinding white tactical floodlights flared from every single direction, turning the dark farm into midday. "FBI, put your hands in the air. Get on the ground." 4 massive black tactical trucks roared out from the tree line, completely surrounding Dominic's vehicles. Dozens of heavily armed FBI agents in full body armor poured out like a swarm of angry hornets, assault rifles raised and laser sights painting red dots all over Dominic and his thugs. It was overwhelming, deafening, and perfectly executed. Hart stood up fully. "About damn time, Cole." A man in his 40s wearing an FBI vest over a suit stepped forward. "Dominic Cruz, Bruno Volkov, you are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, racketeering, and the murder of a federal informant." "This is ridiculous." Dominic spat, his arrogant mask finally cracking, panic setting into his eyes. I am a legitimate financial advisor. We have 18 months of surveillance, wire transfers, offshore bank records, and the evidence your mother-in-law compiled before you had her silenced. Agent Cole shot back. Cuff him. Two heavily armored agents slammed Dominic onto the hood of his precious Mercedes. The cuffs clicked loudly. Bruno didn't even try to resist. He just stared at me with dead, shark-like eyes as they took him down. Another agent emerged from the woods, physically dragging a man in handcuffs. It was Detective Vincent Morales. Found him hiding in the tree line with binoculars and a radio tuned to their frequency. The agent reported. Morales refused to meet my gaze. He was the corrupt cop who had warned me. The rat feeding Dominic information the entire time. Allison Hayes Cruz, Agent Cole said, turning to my sobbing daughter. You are also under arrest. No! The word tore out of my throat before I could stop it. She didn't, Daddy, I'm so sorry. Allison wailed as an agent grabbed her arm and forced her hands behind her back. I didn't know about Mom. I thought it was just real estate. I thought Dominic was helping you. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. The agent droned, leading her toward a cruiser. Please, Daddy, please. I stood frozen in Dorothy's ruined rose garden, surrounded by the flashing red and blue lights, entirely unable to breathe. My daughter was in handcuffs. My wife's murderer was in handcuffs. Agent Hart approached me slowly. Russell, you need to breathe, and you should open the envelope from the box. Dorothy wanted you to read it tonight. An EMT appeared, trying to check my blood pressure, but I waved him off. The world felt distant, muted. The flashing lights painted the farmhouse red and blue. My shaking hands tore open the thick envelope I had pulled from the box. It was a single sheet of paper. My name was written at the top in Dorothy's unmistakable script. My dearest Russell, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am so deeply sorry for keeping these secrets. I had to protect you and Allison. I've been working as a confidential informant for the FBI. Our beautiful farm has been hijacked to distribute illegal narcotics. Dominic arranged all of it. He needed a rural property that no one would suspect, and he used our daughter to get it. I discovered it completely by accident one night. The trucks, the voices near the old well. I found the cave entrance and saw what they were stockpiling. I couldn't let it continue. I've quietly set up a hidden trust fund containing $390,000. Mitchell Goldstein has all the legal details. It is completely protected. Dominic cannot touch a single cent of it. Russell, you are 67 years old. This farm has been a heavy burden. You do not have to keep it. Whatever you decide to do, I support you. From that little diner in Portsmouth 35 years ago, I knew you were the one. If I don't make it through this, please know that I have zero regrets. Except one, I desperately wish I had more time with you. Stay safe, trust Agent Hart. All my love, Dorothy, P.S. Russell. There is one more thing about Dominic. He is not who you think he is. Ask Dennis to check his Boston address, 227 Commonwealth Avenue. I love you forever. I read the last line 3 times. The tears I had held back for an entire year finally broke through. I dropped to my knees in the freezing dirt of Dorothy's ruined rose garden and wept. I wept for my brave wife. I wept for my foolish daughter. And I wept for everything that had been maliciously poisoned from within. Hart's hand settled warmly on my shoulder. Boston, 227 Commonwealth Avenue, I whispered. What the hell is there? Her expression was grim. We'll find out. But Russell, whatever Dorothy discovered, it is going to be incredibly hard to hear. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it securely over my heart. I had already lost everything that mattered. How much worse could it possibly get? I sat alone at the kitchen table at 4 a.m., Dorothy's letter gripped tightly in my hand. The image of my daughter sobbing in handcuffs was burned into my retinas. The phone rang sharply. It was Dennis, Dorothy's younger brother. Russell, I'm on my way, he said, his voice unusually tight. I found something about Dominic, something you need to see. By 6:00 a.m., Dennis's rusted truck pulled into the gravel driveway. He climbed out carrying a laptop bag and a thick manila folder. I opened the door, and he immediately pulled me into a fierce hug. He sat down at the kitchen table. After you told me about Dorothy's note and the Boston address, I couldn't sleep, Dennis said, opening his laptop. I started digging 227 Commonwealth Avenue. It's a luxury 2-bedroom condo, purchased 7 years ago. By Dominic. By Dominic and Victoria Cruz, the name landed like a heavy stone, Victoria. Dennis pulled a stack of papers from the folder. Marriage certificate. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Dominic Alexander Cruz and Victoria Ann Morrison. Legally married June 12th. I stared blankly at the official document. That's physically impossible. Dennis Dominic married Allison 3 years after the date on this certificate. Dennis laid out more papers, his face grim. Joint tax returns spanning 7 full years. Filed as married. Joint bank accounts, utility bills in both names. My chest tightened painfully. You're saying Dominic was already married when he stood at the altar with my daughter? The wedding Allison had. It wasn't even legal. He's still married to Victoria, Dennis said softly, pulling out a color photograph. And they have 2 children. I looked at the image. Dominic genuinely smiling with his arm wrapped around a pretty, dark-haired woman in her mid-30s. 2 kids, a boy around 8, a girl around 5, a perfectly normal, happy family at the beach. The boy had Dominic's cold eyes. Their names are Ethan and Sophie, Dennis said quietly. Dominic spends at least 3 days a week there. 3 days a week. My voice sounded hollow. Allison thought he had constant business trips, elite client meetings in Boston. He had a whole other family. Dennis, Russell. Your daughter isn't Dominic's wife, she is his mistress, and she had absolutely no idea. I stood up and paced to the window. Allison, my only child, had been flawlessly played. Used, manipulated, and groomed by a sociopath who already had a wife and kids. He needed the farm, I realized, the cave system, the isolated rural location. He couldn't just buy a property like this outright. It would bring too much federal scrutiny. But if he married into an aging farm family, he could access the land without raising any suspicion. Dorothy started noticing. Dennis finished the thought. She started investigating, and when she got too close, he had her silenced. Allison was just a pawn. I whispered, Allison is a victim, Russell. Just like you, just like Dorothy. The phone rang again. I grabbed it. Hayes, Russell. It's Agent Hart. Her voice was urgent. We've been processing the evidence. There's something else about Allison. Something you need to see immediately. My stomach plummeted. What is it? Not over the phone. I need you at the Portland field office right now. You shouldn't hear this alone. Russell, thank you for getting here so fast, she said, nodding politely to Dennis. She led us through multiple layers of security to conference room 4B. Inside, a long table was covered with evidence bags, documents, and a man in his 50s wearing a sharply tailored suit. Russell Hayes, Hart introduced. This is Mitchell Goldstein. He was your wife's personal attorney. Goldstein stood, extending his hand. Mr. Hayes, I am profoundly sorry. Your wife was an incredibly remarkable, courageous woman. I shook his hand firmly but said nothing. Hart gestured to the chairs. She placed 2 legal documents side by side on the table. This, she pointed to the left document, is your wife's actual legally binding will. Drafted exactly 2 months before she passed away. I looked down at Dorothy's signature, the neat, careful loops I had known for 35 years. It establishes a secure trust fund of exactly $390,000 in your name, Goldstein explained. It is ironclad, completely protected from external claims. And it ensures the farm remains entirely yours. Dorothy wanted you to be financially secure. Hart then pointed to the document on the right, and this is a will that Allison presented to the probate court 1 month after your wife passed away. Similar format, similar legal language, but entirely wrong. Wrong how? Dennis asked. This version leaves absolutely everything. The farm, the assets, total control to Allison. Hart's finger traced the signature. That signature is a complete forgery. The word hit me like a physical punch to the gut. How do you know? Goldstein pulled out high-resolution photographs. Professional handwriting analysis. Your wife's genuine signature has incredibly consistent pressure patterns. This forgery matches the general visual shape, but the micro-pressure is completely wrong. Hart added more photos. Ink dating. Your wife signed the authentic documents in September. This forged document used an entirely different ink composition, created weeks after she was already gone. Digital forensics confirms it beyond a shadow of a doubt, Goldstein continued. The forged documents were created directly on Allison's personal laptop, shortly after Dorothy passed away. She scanned Dorothy's genuine signature from old bank checks, and digitally grafted it onto fraudulent documents. I stared blankly at the papers, my only daughter's felony crime laid out in cold detail. Why? My throat tightened. Dorothy loved her. Why would she do this to her own mother? Dominic, Hart's voice was flat. He needed immediate, total access to the farm. The narcotics operation was expanding. Sergei Kozlov was aggressively pressuring him for more storage. And Dominic was quietly supporting two entirely separate families. He was drowning in massive, unmanageable debt. The only solution, Goldstein added, was to fully control this property and force a sale to Pinnacle Holdings. $3.9 million would have been enough to pay off the Russian cartel and disappear completely. So he ordered Allison to forge her dead mother's will. Dennis asked. We believe so. Hart nodded. Allison claims she didn't know the full extent of his cartel operation. She is fully admitted to the forgery, but she vehemently insists Dominic manipulated her. He told her Dorothy's actual will was drafted in a moment of emotional distress, that it was unfair, and needed correction to secure their future. What happens to her now? I asked. Allison will be formally charged with forgery, wire fraud, and accessory to the conspiracy, Hart stated. If she cooperates fully and testifies against Dominic in federal court, we can offer a plea deal. 4 to 7 years in a federal facility, and Dominic? Dennis asked. Federal charges, conspiracy to distribute, racketeering, money laundering, fraud, bigamy, and murder of a federal informant. 40 to 50 years minimum, no parole. Goldstein slid the authentic legal papers toward me. These are your wife's authentic documents. The trust is yours, completely protected. The trust was funded entirely from her personal assets. She sold her grandmother's antique jewelry collection, liquidated her personal bonds, and withdrew her savings very carefully over time. The withdrawals, $42,500. Dorothy had been desperately protecting me, preparing for the absolute worst. Before we left, Hart showed me her phone. It was a breaking news article. Massive drug ring busted on historic Maine farm. This went public this morning. Hart warned, if you decide to visit Allison, that's entirely your choice. But she's been begging for you. The drive back to the farm was thick with silence. Dennis stayed the night. That evening, a heavy knock echoed at the door. Dennis came back into the kitchen, carrying a sealed envelope. Courier, from the Cumberland County Jail. I tore it open. It was a single piece of lined paper. Allison's handwriting was shaky, smeared with tears. Daddy, please let me explain. I know you hate me. I know what I did, but please come. I need to tell you everything. I read the short note 3 times. Dennis looked over my shoulder. You going? I don't know, I said. She's still your daughter, Russell, Dennis said softly. She forged her mother's will. She tried to steal absolutely everything Dorothy left me. She was also aggressively manipulated by a sociopath who had her fully believing she was legally married to him. Dennis countered. A man who used her and lied to her about his entire existence. I'm not saying what she did was right. I'm saying it's incredibly complicated. I folded the tear-stained letter and tucked it into my pocket. My daughter was sitting in a jail cell. She had betrayed me. She had betrayed Dorothy's memory. And now she was desperately asking me to hear her side. Trust your instincts. Dorothy's voice echoed in my head. What would my instincts tell me about Allison? I didn't know anymore. I held Allison's letter all night, entirely unable to sleep. By morning, Dennis found me sitting at the kitchen table. You go, he asked, pouring 2 black coffees. I don't know. He sat across from me, his eyes tired but firm. She's still your daughter, Russell. Whatever she's done, she's still yours. I'm just saying you should hear her out. Dorothy would want you to. Dorothy, I pulled her letter from my pocket. I had read the logistical parts to Hart and Dennis, but there was more at the end. About Allison. I pray she is not involved deeply. I hope Dominic hasn't pulled her completely into his darkness. She's our daughter. She makes mistakes. She's incredibly stubborn like you, and highly emotional like me. But underneath it all, she has a good heart. If she has done something wrong, she will have to face the consequences. But Russell, please don't lose her completely. Don't let your anger poison what is left of our family. Live, my darling. Don't just survive, live. Love, forgive if you can. I folded the letter carefully. Okay, I said, my voice thick. I'll go. Dennis drove. The Cumberland County Jail was a squat, brutal concrete building, surrounded by chain-link fences and razor wire. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of industrial bleach and quiet despair. They led me to a secure visiting room. This wasn't the open kind with tables. This was the maximum security section, thick glass partitions and heavy black phones. I sat in a hard plastic chair and waited. A heavy metal door clanged open. Allison shuffled in, escorted by a stern-faced guard. She was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had lost significant weight in just a few days. She looked 10 years older than the polished woman who had sat in my kitchen just days ago. She sat down and picked up the phone. Her hand shook violently. I picked up mine. "Daddy." Her voice cracked instantly. Tears spilled down her hollow cheeks. "I'm so sorry, I am so sorry." I said absolutely nothing. I just looked at her. "I didn't know," she continued, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I swear to God I didn't know about the narcotics. Not until late October. I found strange texts on Dominic's phone. I asked him about it. He swore it was just a bad real estate investment gone wrong, that he was trying to get out. I believed him. You believed him." My voice was flat, devoid of sympathy. "He was my husband," she sobbed. "Or, I thought he was. I didn't know about Victoria. I didn't know about the kids in Boston. I didn't know any of it until the FBI interrogated me." "But you knew about the forgery," I stated coldly. She flinched. "Yes," Dominic said. "He said Mom's will was deeply unfair. He said she had written it when she was upset and not thinking clearly. He showed me a draft he claimed she had wanted to make, but never finished. He said we were just legally completing her final wishes. And you believe that too." I wanted to believe him. Her voice broke into a high keen. "He was my husband, my partner. I loved him, and he was so incredibly convincing, Dad. So manipulative." She pressed her trembling palm against the thick glass. "I know that's not a valid excuse. I know I should have questioned it, but I was so scared." "Scared of what?" "Of him." She looked down. "By the time I started suspecting things weren't right, I was in way too deep. He'd get angry when I asked questions. He'd subtly threaten things. He'd say, 'You wouldn't want anyone to think you were involved in financial improprieties.' I didn't realize he was grooming me. I just felt trapped." I studied her face, desperately trying to find the truth beneath the tears. "When did you find out about your mother?" Her entire body shuddered. "The FBI told me, after they arrested me. They said Mom had been working with them, that she'd been investigating him, that what happened to her wasn't an accident." She looked up, her mascara-streaked face twisted in agony. "I swear on my life, Daddy, I didn't know. Mom was my best friend. I miss her every single day. Yet you actively forged her signature to steal her farm." "Yes." She didn't look away this time. "I did, and I will regret it for the rest of my miserable life. I was wrong. I was stupid, but I never ever wanted Mom to get hurt. If I had known what he was truly capable of." She couldn't finish the sentence. The silence stretched heavily between us. I thought of Dorothy's letter. "Don't lose her completely. You'll have to pay for what you did," I said finally, my voice steady. "I know you will cooperate fully with the FBI. You will testify against Dominic in open court. You will serve your time. I will, whatever it takes." Her eyes pleaded with me. "Daddy, I know you probably hate me. I understand if you never want to see my face again. But please know I am sorry." I stood up. She stood too, pressing both hands desperately against the glass. "I don't hate you, Allison," I said. "But I don't know how to forgive you yet, either. What you did to your mother's memory to me. It's going to take a long time, I understand. But you're still my daughter." I placed my calloused hand on the glass, matching hers. "And when you get out, if you get out, we'll figure out what comes next." Her face completely crumpled. Thank you, Daddy." Winter settled over the farm like a heavy blanket. But for the first time in a year, I didn't let it bury me. By March, the last of the snow finally melted. I had used Dorothy's $390 trust fund exactly as she intended, to protect and build. The first priority was security. We installed high-definition cameras, motion lights, and new locks. I hired a contractor to permanently seal the limestone cave entrance with 2 solid tons of concrete. Next was the barn. Dennis had moved into the guest room full-time to help me renovate it. Then came the farm itself. I hired a young, energetic couple, Owen, who had a degree in sustainable agriculture. and Morgan, who had a strong background in veterinary science. They moved into the renovated farmhand cottage and immediately brought life back to the property. One afternoon, while cleaning out the barn, Owen handed me a worn, spiral-bound notebook he'd found. It was Dorothy's garden journal. Inside were meticulous sketches, detailed plans, and bulleted lists. Hayes Heritage Farm, organic vegetables, greenhouse for year-round growing, educational tours for school groups, farm-to-table dinners, sustainable farming workshops. On the very last page, dated just 2 months before I lost her, she had written, "This farm has been in my family for generations, but it doesn't have to stay exactly the same. Growth isn't betrayal, change isn't forgetting. Russell will think I'm crazy, but I think he'll love it once he sees it working." My vision blurred with hot tears. She had been planning this beautiful future while secretly investigating Dominic. While wearing an FBI wire, she had still been dreaming of tomorrow. I looked up at Owen and Morgan. "Okay," I said, my voice thick but resolute. "Let's do it. Let's build Hayes Heritage Farm." Summer rolled on, the farm thrived. We hosted school tours, garden clubs, and families. The organic vegetable stand sold out every single Saturday. But August inevitably became September. September became October. And then November approached. It had been exactly 2 years since Dorothy passed. And now, it was finally time for the trial. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my black tie. Black suit, crisp white shirt, polished shoes. I looked like a man going to a funeral. Which, in a way, I was. I was going to bury Dominic Cruz. The Cumberland County Superior Court was a massive granite fortress. I sat in the front row of the packed courtroom, staring intensely at the back of Dominic's head. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, perfectly styled hair, sitting calmly between 2 high-priced defense attorneys. He hadn't looked at me once. Dennis sat beside me. Agent Hart and Agent Cole sat 2 rows back. "All rise," the bailiff barked. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison took the bench. Case number 24 CR 1847, State of Maine and the United States of America versus Dominic Alexander Cruz. The defendant faces 6 counts: conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, racketeering, bigamy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder of a federal informant. How does the defendant plead? Dominic stood up, buttoning his expensive jacket. "Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor." His voice was smooth, confident. The trial began. Agent Cole meticulously laid out the federal investigation, showing the jury Dorothy's compiled evidence, the ledger, the photos of the cave system, and the offshore wire transfers. At noon on the 3rd day, they brought Allison in. My daughter shuffled into the massive courtroom, in her bright orange jumpsuit, her hands heavily cuffed. She looked pale and hollowed out. She didn't look at me as the bailiff uncuffed her at the witness stand. The prosecutor walked her through it. The courtship, the wedding ceremony that wasn't legal, the years of lies. "When did you learn about the defendant's criminal activities?" the prosecutor asked. "Last October." Allison's voice trembled. "I found texts on his phone, code words. He swore it was a legitimate business deal gone wrong that he was trying to get out of." I believed him. I always believed him, and the falsified will. Allison's face crumpled. He told me my mother's real will was drafted out of anger and was unfair. He said we were just completing her true wishes. She looked directly at the jury, tears streaming. "I was wrong. I forged my mother's signature. I tried to steal from my own father. I am so deeply sorry." Dominic's attorney viciously tore into her during cross-examination, but Allison held her ground, broken but telling the absolute truth. On the 5th day, they called me. I walked slowly to the stand, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Hayes, tell us about your wife." I looked directly at the jury. Dorothy was the strongest, bravest person I have ever known. She discovered illegal, violent activity on our property. She contacted the FBI. She wore a wire. She risked absolutely everything to stop a criminal cartel from using our land to destroy lives. "And what happened to her?" I paused, letting the heavy silence fill the courtroom. My wife did not fall in the dark. She was silenced because she was about to expose the defendant's operation. She gave her life protecting our community. Dominic's attorney immediately objected, but I had already said it. The jury heard it. I stepped down from the stand and locked eyes with Dominic. For the first time he looked at me. His eyes were completely empty, Cold, no remorse. Just calculation. On the 7th day, the jury reached a verdict. On count 1, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. How do you find? The judge asked. Guilty. They read through all 6 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Dominic's face didn't twitch. The next morning, Judge Morrison delivered the sentence. Mr. Cruz, you exploited the deepest trusts. You facilitated a violent criminal enterprise. You showed absolutely no remorse for the lives you destroyed. I sentence you to 50 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. You are fined $500,000, and all assets are forfeited. 50 years. Dominic would be 90 years old when he was finally eligible for release. As the bailiff led him away, he walked past me one last time. Still no emotion, just that cold, sociopathic stare. Justice had been served. The man who destroyed my family was going to prison for the rest of his life. So why did I still feel so incredibly empty? A week later, I sat in a much smaller, quieter courtroom for Allison's sentencing. The judge accepted the plea deal. Ms. Hayes Cruz, the judge said softly, you made terrible, illegal choices, but you have also taken responsibility and provided crucial testimony. You are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Use this time to become the person your mother believed you could be. Daddy, I'm so sorry, Allison cried as they led her away. 4 years. My daughter would be 43. When she got out, I would be 72. Dennis found me staring out at the bare brown fields of the farm a few days later. You need to get away before the winter sets in, he said firmly. Go somewhere Dorothy always wanted to go. You need to say goodbye properly. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the cliffs of Moher. The wind whipped violently off the Atlantic Ocean, cold and wild. I held a small wooden box containing Dorothy's ashes. You did the right thing, Dorothy, I shouted into the wind, my voice cracking. You were braver than I ever was. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I tilted the box. The fierce wind caught the ashes, lifting them up into the gray sky, swirling them with the seabirds, before they disappeared into the vastness of the ocean. You're home now, I whispered. You're free. And for the first time in 2 agonizing years, I felt something other than grief. I felt peace. 3 years and 4 months later, March, I stood in the cold parking lot of the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, staring intensely at the heavy steel gate. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel of Dennis's truck to steady them. I was 71 years old now, my hair had gone completely white, and my knees ached when the weather turned cold. The farm kept me physically strong, but age was an undefeated opponent. The loud buzzer sounded, the heavy gate rolled open. Allison walked out. She wore plain civilian clothes jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and worn sneakers. Her hair was cut short, practical. She had aged far more than 3 years. There were deep lines around her eyes, and a hardened posture that hadn't been there before. She saw the truck and stopped, clearly uncertain if I would actually be there. I opened the door and climbed out. We stood 15 feet apart in the freezing March wind. Hi, Dad, she said softly. Allison, she walked toward me slowly. Thank you for coming. I didn't know if your mother would want me here. She flinched visibly at that, but nodded. Yeah, she would. We drove back to Maine in heavy silence. I had arranged a small room for her at a respectable boarding house in town. I told her firmly she was not staying at the farm. Trust had to be earned back, inch by painful inch. The farm was unrecognizable from the dark, lonely place it had been 4 years ago. The barn Dennis had rebuilt stood tall and proud. The new greenhouse glowed with warm grow lights. But it was the expanded rose garden, stretching across the entire hillside, that caught Allison's breath. It's beautiful, she whispered. I led her past the vegetable fields to the memorial garden. What had been 24 bushes was now over 100, arranged in concentric circles around a waist-high granite stone. It read Dorothy O'Brien Hayes, truth seeker, protector, beloved wife. Allison stood frozen, staring at her mother's memorial. Then she fell to her knees in the cold dirt. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking completely. Mom, I am so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was. I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry for everything. She sobbed into her hands, her shoulders shaking with the weight of years of regret. I stood back and watched, feeling the immense weight of the prison letters, the apologies, and my daughter's long, slow journey toward understanding exactly what she had destroyed. This wasn't a performance. This was raw, agonizing grief. Maybe, I thought, there was hope after all. By June, Hayes Heritage Farm was alive with hundreds of voices. It was the third annual summer festival, and the biggest one yet. Over 200 people wandered the grounds. Dennis was aggressively directing parking. Owen led tours through the greenhouse, explaining sustainable hydroponics. Morgan was demonstrating beekeeping while carrying a very special bundle strapped to her chest, a baby girl they had named Dorothy. As the sun began to set, painting the Maine sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, I stood on a small wooden platform near the barn. A hush fell over the crowd. I looked at the faces gathered below, Owen and Morgan holding baby Dorothy, Dennis standing proudly, Agent Hart and Agent Cole, who had driven up from Boston, Victoria and her children, and Allison, wearing a farm staff badge, tears shining in her eyes. 4 years ago, I said into the microphone, my voice echoing across the fields, I thought my life was completely over. I thought I had lost absolutely everything. The crowd was dead silent. But Dorothy left me more than just a farm. She left me a mission. She showed me that protecting what is right matters far more than protecting what is comfortable. She taught me that second chances aren't just possible. They are completely necessary. That family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up when everything goes dark, who stays to fight beside you, and who puts in the agonizing work to earn their second chance. I raised my glass of apple cider. This farm is about resilience. It's about taking something violently broken and making it beautiful again. To Dorothy, to courage, to truth, and to all of you, for proving that hope is stronger than despair. To Dorothy. The crowd roared back. Later that night, after the last cars had driven away, I walked alone through the rose garden under a sky full of bright stars. The summer breeze carried the sweet, rich scent of the blooming flowers. I knelt by the cold granite stone. We did it, Em. We're living, we're loving, we're forgiving. Just like you asked, I smiled, a genuine deep smile. I'll keep going for as long as I can. I promise. I stood up and looked back at the farmhouse, the lights glowing warmly in the windows, laughter drifting from the kitchen. I felt whole. Looking back, I see how easily family betrayal creeps in through small lies, blind trust, and comfortable ignorance. My daughter wasn't inherently evil. She was masterfully manipulated by a sociopath who knew exactly how to exploit love for profit. That's the terrifying danger of family betrayal. It hides behind familiar, smiling faces. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this. Pay absolute attention. Dorothy saw the red flags, midnight trucks, aggressive pressure, strangers in the dark, and she acted. She didn't wait for permission. Don't be like me, trusting blindly until it's far too late. Family betrayal cuts the deepest because we drop our guard with those we love. But trust your gut. When something feels fundamentally wrong, investigate it. Protect what matters to you, even when it's incredibly hard. These stories aren't just about tragic loss. They are about profound resilience. About building something beautiful from broken, jagged pieces. About a forgiveness that doesn't forget, but consciously chooses to move forward anyway. As long as you are still breathing, there is always time to make things right. I appreciate you staying with me through this long, intense journey. Drop a comment below. If you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven Allison? I'm genuinely curious about your take. If this story moved you, hit subscribe so you catch my next one. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.